Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we're looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and it's drinking game day, Andy. How long will it be before Pete mentions how much more he likes Jekyll and Hyde Hulk versus Professor Hulk? That's on deck.
Let's start drinking right now. Today we're talking about minute 76, which begins with Black Widow's trigger for the Hulk and ends with Iron Man arriving at the scene of the damaged engine. Joining us on the show today and all week, we have Professor of Political Geography at University College London and author of Captain America and the Nationalist Superhero, Jason Dittmer. Hello, Jason.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
In a glorious power move, he's already drinking on camera. That was amazing.
I have the advantage of time zones working for me. It's a totally decent thing to do in London at this point.
Totally decent.
True. Okay, so let's just start off. You picked this full week, so we're talking with you about minutes 76 through 80, and I just would love to know, what is it that drew you to this particular section of the film?
I mean, it's got a lot of action, and I thought that was would be fun to talk about. It's obviously a pivotal moment in the movie, or moments, I should say, given the nature of the show, since it's subdivided 5 ways. It's the moment in which kind of Loki's plot seems to be coming true, and the first big bust up, shall we say, of the Avengers, and so, I'd have done 20 minutes if you'd let me, but, I stuck with it nice and tight here, 5 minutes.
I mean, this is a good a point in the film to come in. Hawkeye is here with these operatives. They are invading. They've blown up Engine 3. Loki is smiling. And clearly, this is kind of part of the plan. And we've been talking a little bit with guests about this plan and kind of what their goal is. What is your take on kind of the sense of what Loki and his team are trying to essentially do by invading in the first place and having Loki get captured?
I mean, I think at this point, in the long arc of Loki in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're still in his kind of nefarious mastermind stage, and his idea of kind of setting the Hulk against everyone else and causing the team to erupt, is a kind of, erosion from the inside of the obviously superior power of the Avengers, and playing on the fact that there are such big personalities who are used to working alone, which I think kind of fits nicely in what's going on in the MCU at this point, that you have the solo films coming together to make the big film. And how do you fit these big personalities or big bodies even into the single frame? And it's kind of before the Avengers have managed to smooth out a lot of their differences. And obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it's the kind of conflict that actually allows them to then surmount these challenges and become something bigger and better.
We're starting this minute off specifically as far as like all those heroes and everything. This is that point in this film where Bruce has let his anger take hold and he has hulked out. And this is really that first moment where we're getting to see kind of Hulk in action. And this version of Hulk, as opposed to the version that we had in The Incredible Hulk, which was, it was still Hulk, just slightly different because obviously a different actor in the role. Now we're getting Mark Ruffalo in it. And I'd love to get a sense from you, your impressions of Hulk at this particular point, as we see Natasha clearly in fear for her life as she frees herself from this pipe that had fallen on her and now trying to flee from this very angry monster running after her.
Yeah, I think Pete already gestured to it. Here you have the kind of the early Hulk from the comics who's untamed, undomesticated, represents a kind of primal, destructive urge. The Jekyll and Hyde Hulk, I think Pete called it, which is clearly the kind of cultural reference for this, going back to Victorian London. And so I think, what I'm struck by in the scene is you see a kind of, it is a slightly strange Hulk in the sense that, he is both massive and powerful and yet somehow plucking individual tiles out of the ground and somehow tiptoeing through this place. in a way that's subtle enough that Natasha's kind of sitting in the dark listening for him. I mean, you
He's
don't normally
super
have to listen.
dainty, like very gentle Hulk.
Yes,
That's
it's like
yeah.
it reminds me of Fred Flintstone bowling.
Or Disney's dancing ballet hippo, right?
Yes, exactly. The kind of, it's a slightly strange visual, but it obviously works, I think, in terms of heightening the stakes. But it is slightly odd too, in the sense that Loki's whole idea is that you set this atom bomb off, which is the way he's often referred to, inside the shield helicarrier and so on. But it's not really much of a bomb going off at first, right? It's this tiptoeing version of the Hulk. I don't know. What do you guys make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that I love so much about this particular sequence is the fact that we get the Hulk that they were afraid of the whole time, right? And that's the Hulk we needed to see. And it's why this Hulk is peak Hulk, and it's just all downhill from here, right? Because Professor Hulk is a character that formerly had stakes and has been neutered of those stakes.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to see stakes. It's where we get to see why people have to fear the duality of Banner Hulk. And it's just glorious to watch them have to reconcile that fear with the anxiety that they had pre-transformation. I think it's just really great. And I don't know. I mean, part of the long arc of Hulk is, at what point does the production team lose steam in figuring out ways to challenge us with the duality of Hulk? And I totally get it. And the comics certainly did over time. But this is peak Hulk for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never quite have full touches of this Hulk. Because, I mean, even in Thor Ragnarok, we're getting, it's kind of angry Hulk still, but he's no longer just kind of the atom bomb character, right? He's angry, but he's also a thinking, working being that is making decisions. It's just generally he's still kind of cranky with everything. And so this is really the time where we get a scarier Hulk. And I am curious if we will get back to this Hulk at some point, as they potentially, look at doing a Planet Hulk type of story, something like that. So,
yeah, how do you ever do that, right? It's like they've uncorked Professor Hulk. Like, how do you ever believe that Hulk has stakes like this ever again? And count me as just like, I'm dubious. And part of the reason I'm dubious is because I would love to be surprised. I would love to be surprised by them doing something really interesting with this character, particularly as long as Ruffalo is still into playing it.
I mean, I think there's something there about, the Disneyfication of it, in that it's like, when you think about the arc of Hulk, he becomes much more comedic. I mean, if you're faced with the challenge, I mean, it's also kind of in some ways the challenge of Superman, right? That you have this all-powerful character. And it's like, what kind of stories can you tell with an all-powerful character?
Exactly.
And so here, Superman kind of goes in one direction, obviously, and we won't talk about the DCU anymore because, quite frankly, it doesn't deserve it. And but over here, you've got the Hulk kind of becoming this cuddlier, funnier. I mean, quite frankly, more Mark Ruffalo. I mean, he's an amiable sort. It's very hard to dislike Mark Ruffalo or Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner. But the Hulk himself becomes a kind of, you could picture him as a big stuffed animal for sale at Disney World.
I mean, he's giving autographs by the time we get to some of the later films. It's like, okay, definitely a different Hulk. So, well, okay, so continuing our conversation about Hulk before we really kind of get into the chase and everything, I do have thoughts on this cage that we have. We've talked about the cage quite a bit, but we haven't really talked about this. I have a few questions. One,
you're talking about this cage that Loki's in right now?
The cage that Loki's in, exactly. Okay. We see Loki kind of smiling at the fact that, he hears Hulk roaring, and I'm assuming that it's an actual diegetic roar where he's actually hearing it echoing through the halls of the helicarrier. So does it make sense, first of all, if this is designed specifically as a way to get Hulk off in case there's an issue, does it make sense to hold Loki here instead of presumably another cell, which I'm guessing that they must have on this ship? Any thoughts on that? Like, if the chances of Hulk actually hulking out on the helicarrier exist, wouldn't it make sense to have Loki somewhere else?
Solid point.
I think it's really funny that this helicarrier has like the Indiana Jones ending warehouse full of storage containers, but that they would only have one cell for this kind of potentiality. It does feel a little bit awkward that we're only introduced to this one, and why they would put it to use with Loki so quickly. Like Loki, particularly because Loki has demonstrated nothing else but being willing to sit and have diabolical conversations with people while he's wearing handcuffs because he fears nothing, right? Like he's just hubris. And the fact that they feel like they need to put him in the cage, which was designed bespoke for Hulk, is sort of nonsense when you stop and think about it. I almost regret you asking that question because apparently, unbeknownst to me, I had thoughts.
Well, here's my follow-up then. If Bruce is hulking out, if he's starting to go to the stage where he's hulking out, how do they decide, okay, hey, we need you to go to the cell and do it there?
Quick, let's lead you down these tiny catwalks to
how
the
do they,
cell.
Right, how do they, I mean, I was thinking about this as I was watching this, watching Hulk chasing Natasha through the hallways. It's like, wait a minute, if Hulk is roaming free, like, how do they even get him there? It's not like they have a human-sized door on one side and a Hulk-sized door on the other. So, they can run in with the Hulk pursuing them and sneak out the human-sized door and both
like
doors
a
shut.
Rat trap, right?
Yeah, there's no way to get Hulk in here. You'd have to get Bruce in there and say, okay, it's like that point where you're like sick and you're gonna throw up, but you're like, I have to do everything I can to not throw up until I get to the toilet. It's like, okay, Bruce, that's where you are. Hold it in. Wait till you get in there. We'll lock you in, and then you can Hulk out.
But I kind of like the alternative scene, which admittedly isn't what happens, but where Loki's in there, he smiles because he hears the Hulk is going. His whole long shot plan, which he's orchestrated from several days out, predicting all these events. He's like, finally, now the Hulk is loose. He's going to destroy the place, and he's going to set me free. And then he realizes he's held in the one thing in the ship that the Hulk can't damage. And he's stuck in there while the whole place is destroyed, and he's still left in jail to be found later.
Right. Or even worse, Hulk does make its way into the cell, and then it's Hulk and Loki inside the cell together. Also doesn't bode well for Loki. Oh, yeah. I started thinking about this.
Awesome design.
Yeah,
right.
I started thinking about this. I'm like, I don't know if this design really works. It really run into a lot of problems. All right, so we're starting off this cat and mouse chase that we're going to be talking about over the next few days between Natasha and Scary Hulk. We'll just call him. My first note was I wanted to just get a sense from the two of you. We're setting up ideas of some pretty vacant spaces on a ship like this. And I was looking at, okay, just out of curiosity, how many people are typically on board an aircraft carrier? So I looked up like the Nimitz class aircraft carrier. Those have
like thousands.
Over
right?
6,000 personnel are on that. They have 3,200 crew who work on the ship and then 2,800 people who work on the aircraft. Plus they have a small, like 60 people who are on the carrier strike group crew, which is a totally different thing. But anyway, it's about 6,000 people. And so I was like, okay, so they fall to this lower level. They're now running around inside the lower equipment room here. Should there be more people? It feels like we've entered a horror movie for this particular scene where like nobody in the ship happens to be. Does that strike either of you as peculiar?
I feel like this is going to come back to us in maybe a couple of minutes when we get into some of the larger spaces, and there's still, I don't think, enough people.
I mean, I know it's a movie. We don't have the like Lord of the Rings budget to create thousands of CG characters walking around in the background, but it does strike me funny that they've entered a place in the ship where no one happens to be.
I mean, you got to store the canned ham somewhere, Andy. And I think, if you're going to feed 6,000 people, that's a lot of canned ham in a lot of crates, and there's going to be a canned ham room somewhere.
Yes.
And just Black Widow's, such a super spy that she was like, I'm going to lure him to the canned ham.
And that's not where people are.
Maybe he'll get distracted. Maybe he likes ham. You know.
That's what we know about Hulk. He's a big ham head. He really loves his ham.
The real reasons to get him down here. Honey baked ham.
Right. Honey baked ham.
Hulk's, I can't wait for the new branding. Hulk's honey baked ham.
Just a hint of sweetness.
You got it? Hulk will swallow it.
Well, in the scope of Green Eggs and Ham, I suppose that it would tie in quite nicely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we just went there.
Mm-hmm. Poetic.
Well, that takes us then to the bridge, and now we see Fury in action. This is Nick Fury. He's really kind of getting everybody moving now that the ship's been damaged. He says to bring the carrier to a 180 south, take us to the water. So that pretty much means that they were, we're guessing they're somewhere over New Jersey, and the coast, I guess, is directly south of them. I don't know. I would think New Jersey, the coast is either southeast or east of them, but I guess there are obviously some points where there might be a southerly coast in New Jersey. But anyway, that's what his goal at this particular point is. And we get the response from the carrier bridge tech who says, we're blind, navigation recalibrated after the engine failure. And the perfect snarky line. This is the sort of line that I really think the writer sharply knows how to get into kind of a Samuel L. Jackson tone, because that is the sun coming up, then put us on the left. It just sounds so Samuel L. Jackson.
Uh-huh.
How does this little conversation play for the two of you?
I mean, I think it's effective, I suppose. I think you're right. I mean, we're one step away from snakes on a plane here, aren't we? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
But can we talk for a minute about just, maybe you've done this in other minutes recently, other episodes, but I mean, the flying aircraft carrier. I mean, it's
oh yeah,
the from the very premise. I mean, why would you ever fly that over a city or
a populated area? Right.
What's even the point of it? I mean, the whole point, it's like the point of an aircraft carrier is you can fly planes off of it. So,
right.
So
why do you
have
need
a
it
flying
to fly?
aircraft carrier? I mean, all it is just an extra layer of danger to everyone involved. I mean, if an aircraft carrier sinks, you can get in a lifeboat. If an aircraft carrier falls out of the sky, it's a nightmare.
You have to get in a plane.
Yes,
which is really
exactly.
weird.
I mean, it's I just think to fly that over the continental U.S. at all is a major misjudgment.
But I do think it's interesting, though, Jason, like when you think back to the early helicarrier in the comics, because it's been around as an artifact of the comics forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to put the sort of cultural lens on why the helicarrier became a thing in the first place, right? Like what was it a manifestation of or a representation of in the comics?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, it's a classic next level thing, right? So that, it kind of comes out in the 1960s in the comics, which is kind of the real kind of origins or peak, shall we say, of nuclear aircraft carrier technology. Not the peak, they obviously get better. But I mean, in terms of it being the new thing, right? Where you have these super carriers that can travel the world and stay at sea for years and all that kind of a thing. And so as a kind of apotheosis of American military power, to do that, but then have it fly.
Right.
And then because that's obviously a patently vulnerable thing to have, you have to make it be able to go cloak and do all that kind of thing. I mean, it pains me in a way that they brought that back for the movies, because they've done, they've made pretty good efforts to try and produce kind of plausible scenarios in a patently implausible world, but to bring back the flying aircraft carrier is a bit, I don't know, a bit too much fan service for me.
I don't know. I stand on that line, right? That it's one of those things. If you stop too long to think about it, it's ridiculous. Lest we forget, helicarriers are cool. Like that in the movie it might be just enough. But when you go back to like the 60s and as they kept sort of amplifying the sort of helicarrier presence through the comics, like this whole idea that, yes, we've conquered the sea and we've conquered space and we've also conquered sky, right? This is a thing, like our dominance exists everywhere as a manifestation of political and military prowess. Like I get it. I get its representation much more than its practical application. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Well, and they've certainly, brought up things into this existing helicarrier that we have in the film that we have talked about that are pretty illogical as far as the way it's constructed. Like, okay, so you can cloak it just from the bottom so the people on the ground can't see you, and the planes that do want to land on you can still see a runway below them if they're coming in. But a Boeing 747 flying next to you will still see you. You're not hidden from them. Likewise, the top is still visible. So as the top passes between the sun and the earth, there's going to be a massive, shadow underneath it. And so people who are looking up at the sky, seeing a clear sky, suddenly are going to have the sun blocked out. Like, what? Where did the sun just go? Like, there are elements about their tech that just kind of make you scratch your head when you think about it too much. And so and
also Google Maps. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Eventually,
and satellites. I mean, every satellite is going to see it floating over the Earth. It's like, why? How did this aircraft carrier get on in the middle of Utah or whatever,
It's so funny. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Everyone should get one.
Everyone needs one.
I'm in one right now.
Well, let's talk about our carrier bridge tech. So this person who has the fun lines about not being able to navigate because they're flying blind is one of our carrier bridge techs. It is Jesse Garcia, who gets the joy of going up against Nick Fury in this particular moment. And I just wanted to do the IMDb game with Jesse Garcia. Are either of you familiar with Jesse Garcia? I'm not sure.
Man. You're like an incredible troll on these things. Come on. You're just setting us up.
In film school, I'm afraid. Nothing would be on IMDb.
I'm definitely familiar with the other Garcia. Like, whoever you're talking about, I'm really familiar with the other one.
Well, he has he's pretty, he ends up in a lot of bigger projects and, is pretty busy. 81 credits at this point right now on IMDb. What IMDb says his top 4 known fors are, number 1, The Avengers. Here is the carrier bridge tech.
I would have gotten that one.
Absolutely famous.
Exactly. Number 2, the film Quinceañera from 2006, which actually was pretty big. It certainly was popular. I don't know if it was a film festival one, but I do remember that one coming out. A lot of festival buzz with that film when it came out in 2006. Third, he plays Dwayne in Alexandra and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day.
Oh, so I know that. That was Carell, right? Carell and Jennifer Garner. And she's all in news right now. Yeah.
Yep. Last but not least...
Don't remember him in it.
Last but not least...
Carell and Garner and Garcia. I mean, and Garcia.
Right.
That makes the whole thing.
You'll never forget.
They tie the room together, as one would say. Yeah. Last but not least, a very recent movie, Michael Bay's Ambulance from last year. Yeah, he plays Roberto, one of the people that Jake Gyllenhaal is kind of trying to cut the deal with and everything. So.
Oh, yeah, Droney McDroneface, that movie. That was crazy.
Yeah, fantastic drone work. Whew. That's what I think I remember more. Amazing drone work in that film. But I enjoyed it.
Until you said Gyllenhaal, I didn't remember Gyllenhaal was in it.
Like, just remember
there was
the drones.
No hope to remember Garcia.
It's all
Garcia.
Was just... He steals all the scenes. I mean, Garcia, when I walked out of that movie, I was like, that Garcia guy, he's been places and he's going to more.
Yes, he's going places.
Yes. Going to more.
By
Absolutely.
Air, most likely.
But that's our carrier bridge tech. And, I think he holds his own in this funny little scene about keeping the sun on the left, which, it's a clever little line. And that's what we get out of it.
A powerful cinematic presence.
Yes, that's good old Samuel L. Jackson for sure. Especially when he's wearing
Garcia. I was talking about Garcia.
Well, you also have to be a powerful cinematic presence when you're working opposite Samuel L. Jackson.
That's true. That's true.
Toward the end of this scene, we shift focus, and we're now following Steve as he heads out to the exposed engine damage. First thing that he does when he gets through the door is he sees an engineer there who was helping him get the door open, and then that engineer, along with another one, help somebody who must have been injured as the three of them head out of here. And then we get kind of a sense of scale, and it's just kind of nice getting, we get this camera pullback from Steve as we see him come out into this area that's really damaged, and the camera pulls back and we get a sense of how small he is as opposed to how big this thing is. And Iron Man shows up. This is our chance to chat with you about these two characters. We're going to certainly get more of them, but I mean, Steve and Tony, how are they working for you in this film? Do you like the way that they are moving from where they had been in their previous films to now this team-up film?
I mean, I always found it slightly, if I'm being honest, in the big picture, not speaking about the scene specifically, but I always found the tension between them a bit forced in the kind of early Avengers stuff. In that they both make Steve much more kind of abrasive and egotistical than he kind of naturally is. And
Steve or Tony?
Steve, I think.
Oh, they make Steve. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, or prickly. Like he's easily baited by Tony's toniness, which I just kind of don't think would be the case. I mean, he's too much of a oh God, I sound just so in the bag for Captain America, but he's the kind of guy who might register all of this stuff and tuck it away for later, but he's not really one to rise to the bait very much, I think. And and of course Tony's irritating. That's part of what's fun about him. But I think the stuff that they get into fights about to me feels very kind of contrived. But that's of course the appeal of the movie, is bringing people together and creating conflict. But I did find it a little bit stretched.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the conflict, which has definitely been hit on a number of times up to this point, is the fact that there seems to be something that Tony has against Steve specifically because he is from the era when his dad was around. And that's an element I never was like, why is this the issue that Tony is latching onto that, with Steve as far as his approach with him? That I still don't understand.
That's because you have a good relationship with your father. Like so much of like Tony's animosity. I feel like this is the stretch for me, is that so much of Tony's animosity towards Steve is actually misdirected animosity that was meant for Tony's dad. And if you forget that even for a hot second, their relationship is bananas, Tony and Steve. Like it doesn't make any sense that they can't figure this stuff out. But as soon as you go back, and I think they actually make good on this in later movies, not even later in this movie, but in later movies, we get more introspection from Tony on his relationship with his dad. And it does, I think it does make this movie feel weaker because they're asking us to believe something without setting up enough of the old man, right? Of Tony's relationship with his dad. You have to pull a lot from like Iron Man 2 to make sense of it.
But also given, his kind of, the absence of his father for much of his life, and here's a guy who actually knew him. And, like you'd think there could also be a kind of magnetic dimension to that, right? Where it's like, here's someone who represents that generation, who knew my dad, who could tell me about my dad. I don't know. That would, to me, feel more natural than what we get. But you're right. I mean, later you get a much more thoughtful and well-rounded take on Tony's inner drives.
Yeah. Here's a question we haven't really talked too much about since it happened, but, not too long ago, before the attack, we had this. The group was in the Wishbone lab here on the helicarrier, and they were starting to all fight amongst each other. They were all fighting about anything, and the question was that we had, is it the scepter, the fact that there's in proximity to the Mind Stone that is causing this? Is Loki somehow involved? What's going on here? All of that really kind of gets dropped as soon as the engine explodes and the attack begins. Does that make sense? If they were having this kind of this mental fog kind of brought over them from whatever it was, does it make sense that the explosion kind of shakes them out of it, or should there still be kind of that sense of animosity between people as they go about trying to save the ship?
I mean, I think it's obviously these are people of action, and I think to some extent action kind of overrides whatever the mind was doing. I mean, your take on the Mind Stone is interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. I kind of preferred to think of it as, and I may be wrong, there may be evidence in the film, this isn't the reason, this isn't the way to think about it. But, to me, I felt like it was the mere presence of Loki that introduced doubt or uncertainty into a lot of their interactions. so it was less that the staff itself was doing something, although maybe there's, cues that that's the case. But it's more like now we're in a situation where everybody's on a less firm footing, and the kind of mere existence of him may be symbolized by the staff kind of does the trick. But I probably missed something, if I'm being honest.
It's directed in a way where I suppose it leaves it maybe too open for interpretation, to the point where it ends up feeling a little muddled, because you get that shot that kind of moves over the scepter, and to the point where everything is upside down and the whole group is inverted. And along with kind of that, the sound design amplifies it and makes it seem like the scepter is starting to glow, which is what Clint and in his helicarrier, or not his helicarrier, his Quinjet picks up on. And to the point where in the middle of that scene, people are starting to like grab their heads like they're getting a headache from something, or something is affecting their thought. And Bruce picks up the scepter then, as he's getting angrier and angrier. So I don't know. It just, the way they directed it, I think that we came to the fact that we liked the idea better that Loki was likely doing some form of manipulation as opposed to the scepter. But it really does seem like the scepter is perhaps involved in some capacity.
Well, and let me just say, you're using we awful generously there, Andy. I'm on board, but reluctantly. I actually prefer this as a manifestation of anxiety and frustration and fear between the team. And it kind of frustrates me when we do have that crane shot. And we also have, don't forget, the dizzy shot where it's right before this. Yeah, I mean, when Steve's like Tony's wiping his brow and all dizzy. I just hate that exists, because I prefer this to be a team adjustment and not a scepter-induced adjustment. It's frustrating. I'm on board, but I don't love it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I do either. It's just it's there. Well, I mean, we're at this point where, they're obviously out of whatever fog they were in, and they are, at least these two are working specifically together. Not so much Natasha and Bruce at this point, but we do have these two working together to try doing what they can to save the helicarrier. At this point, I think we're pretty much at the end of this minute as Steve is assessing what's going on, and Tony arrives just in time to start looking as well. That's where the minute ends. I think that this is a good point to wrap things up for today. We'll talk about more of this in tomorrow's minute with minute 77. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and your book and all that.
You're a kind soul to let me plug away. I a number of years ago, did a big project that was about nationalist superheroes, and it culminated in a book called Captain America, the Nationalist Superhero, which, as the name implies, is quite heavily focused on Captain America and the emergence of this idea of superheroes that are linked with countries. And the book is available from Temple University Press in absolutely no fine bookstores, but probably on eBay or somewhere, in the remainder pile.
Worth hunting it down for the covers alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we will put a link for it in the show notes, so you can just click on that to go right to Temple University Press and see the book and get your own copy. And
get two.
Yeah,
I mean,
hey,
you got two hands,
get 5,
2 eyes, 2 copies.
Absolutely. Well, we will be back tomorrow to talk about minute 77. So that's it for today. Pete, thanks as always.
Oh, Andy, tomorrow, I hope to God we find out what this thing runs on.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.